Well, 2025 has come to a close, and with that, we've got the December housing market statistics from Florida Realtors ready to go. While 2025 started much like 2024 and 2023, with sales falling and inventories rising, things changed midway through the year. Along with a continued slowdown in growth in homeowner insurance premiums, mortgage rates fell by more than half a percentage point in the waning months of the year, and as a result, sales really responded here in the Sunshine State. December marked the fifth straight month where new pending sales of single-family homes increased on a year-over-year basis, with nearly 5.5% more homes going under contract than in the same month the previous year. That's easily the longest streak we've seen since the 11-month streak that began in February of 2021, at the height of the pandemic housing boom. Predictably, this has led to a multi-month streak of positive growth for closed sales of single-family homes as well. In December, closed sales in this property type category were up nearly 6% year over year. The second half of the year recovery in sales, including what we saw in December, was just enough to lead to what might be one of the biggest surprises of 2025. Closed sales of Florida single-family homes were actually up for the year overall compared to 2024. The difference was modest, just under 1%, but few people would have predicted at the beginning of 2025, or even halfway through 2025, that we were going to make it into positive territory at all. At the local level, not every market ended up with an annual increase in closed sales for single-family homes like we did at the statewide level, but most of them did. Growth was particularly strong in the Central Panhandle, the Nature Coast, and east into the Villages, and also in much of Southwest Florida. And among the small number of high-population counties that suffered a decline in sales, virtually none of them saw anything worse than a 5 or 6% decline. The annual dollar volume of single-family home sales in Florida increased in 2025 as well, rising by 2% to roughly $155 billion. Nominally, that's the third highest total for this category in the history of our data series, which extends back to 2008. That said, inflation was above 2% in 2025, so in real terms, single-family dollar volume actually declined, but only very slightly by well less than 1%. And that still puts 2025 single-family dollar volume very much on par with that of 3 of the previous 5 years. Over in the condo and townhouse category, sales declines have been steeper than in the single-family category in recent years, particularly due to the gradual introduction of safety regulations and reserve requirements beginning in 2022. While these regulations improve the safety of condo buildings, like any regulations, they do come at a cost. And in this case, the costs have manifested in the form of special assessments and higher condo association fees. So the cost of condo ownership in Florida, on average, is now higher than it was previously. And obtaining financing for condo purchases in some cases has also become more difficult as well. Despite these headwinds, the condo and townhouse category saw its own 5-month streak of year-over-year growth in new contracts to close out 2025. Particularly impressive was December's increase of over 17%. And as was the case for single-family homes, closed sales of condos and townhouses ended the year with a 4-month positive growth streak, rising by nearly 10.5% in December. Unlike what we saw with single-family homes, however, this late-year growth in condo and townhouse sales wasn't enough to compensate for the declines earlier in the year. As a result, condo and townhouse sales for all of 2025 were down compared to 2024 by almost 6%. At the local level, most Florida markets with a substantial stock of condos saw declines in sales in 2025, but not all to the same degree. And there were some bright spots, including positive growth in the Emerald Coast and in much of north central Florida. The statewide annual dollar volume of closed condo and townhouse sales took a hit in 2025, not only due to the decline in sales, but also from mildly lower sale prices. As a result, dollar volume was down by 8.5% for the year, and by 10.5% with inflation factored in. Combining condo and townhouse dollar volume with single-family dollar volume, and the small but not insignificant $3 billion worth of manufactured home volume, Florida home sales totaled close to $198 billion in 2025. That wasn't enough for a nominal increase for the year. The decline in condo and townhouse volume was just too large for the rise in single-family volume to overcome it. The result was still a very slight decline of about 1/3%, but factoring in inflation, the decline was closer to 3%. Let's jump back to the single-family category now and take a look at listing activity and inventory levels. In terms of the number of single-family homes that were newly listed on a Florida multiple listing service each month, the first 4 months of 2025 were incredible. Not only was there a year-over-year increase in new listings in each of these months, but each month's total set the record for that month in our data series, which, as I've said, goes back to the beginning of 2008. That means we saw the highest number of new single-family home listings for any January, any February, any March, and any April since at least 2008. But after that opening burst, new listings of single-family homes sort of fizzled out a bit as 2025 progressed, falling on a year-over-year basis in 6 of the remaining 8 months of the year, including in December when they were down by almost 8%. When all was said and done, new listings for the full year of 2025 were still up compared to 2024, but only by just under 1%. That was only good for 4th place in our data series, behind 2018, 2022, and the all-time record holder, 2021. Locally, most parts of the state saw more new listings of single-family homes in 2025 compared to 2024, although there were a couple of small clusters of areas that did see declines. The strong start to the year and drop-off thereafter for single-family new listings ran very much opposite to the trend in sales, which started the year off weakly, but then surged at the end. Both of these metrics and the trends they followed play a part in explaining the change in single-family inventory over the course of 2025. The number of active listings as of the last day of each month rose from January through May, due in part to high levels of new listings adding to inventory and low levels of sales depleting inventory. But the surge in new listings ended in May, and new pending sales started strengthening in August, both of which were contributors to inventory falling from month to month for most of the rest of the year. As a result, by year's end, single-family inventory returned to almost exactly where it was the year prior. At the local level, though, that's largely not the case. Many markets ended 2025 with more inventory than they started with, including the Tampa Bay area, the Nature Coast, the lower half of the South Florida metro area, and much of the Orlando metro area. Areas that ended the year with less inventory than they started with include Western and Central Panhandle, the Atlantic Coast from Jacksonville down to Palm Beach County, and Southwest Florida. Be careful judging these markets based only off this data, though. Some of these areas that saw their inventories fall over the course of 2025 are also places that still have substantially higher inventory levels than they did at the end of 2019, just ahead of the pandemic. It's also worth noting that if we look all the way back to 2008, at the statewide level, the inventory levels that we're at right now for single-family homes are about 52% below where they were this time in 2008. For now, excess levels of inventory are not a concern in a broad sense for the state of Florida, although there are certainly some pockets of the state where this gap is smaller. However, from the standpoint of market balance, it is encouraging to see that the growth in inventory levels over the past year in many of those places in particular has decelerated or even turned negative. Let's now have a look at new listings and inventory levels for condos and townhouses across Florida. Starting with new listings, they were not up as much as single-family home new listings were in the first 4 months of 2025, although they did set records in January and March. But the rest of the year, new listings were down by quite a bit in almost every month, including by 13.5% in December. The only reason they were up year over year in October 2025 is because of the impact of Hurricanes Helene and Milton in October of 2024, which pushed a fair amount of new listing activity into the following month. For all of 2025 then, new listings of condos and townhouses were down from the year prior, which means 2024 gets to hold on to its crown as the year with the most new listings in our data series. 2025 still had the third most new listings in recent years though, although overall for the data series it was 5th highest after you throw in 2008 and 2010. Most Florida counties saw declines in new listings in 2025 for condos and townhouses. The Southwest Florida region, it should be noted, bucked this trend, although with only very slight increases across the board. The progression of condo and townhouse inventory levels through the 12 months of 2025 very much mirrored that of single-family homes that we discussed earlier, and largely for the exact same reasons. We ended the year with just under 2% more inventory in this category than we had 12 months prior. Note that this pattern of inventory rising at the beginning of the year, falling through the middle of the year, and then briefly rising again late in the year before falling again in December was the prevailing seasonal pattern back in the pre-pandemic years. There's a similar, although less consistent pattern for single-family inventory, but it's much easier to spot here with condos and townhouses. This is suggestive of a return to normal seasonal patterns in 2025, which is a good sign for those who have been hoping to see inventory level out. At the local level, there was a fair amount of variance across counties in terms of how much inventory levels changed throughout 2025 for condos and townhouses. Compared to just before the pandemic, though, condo and townhouse inventory levels remain elevated in almost every county, with the major exception being Miami-Dade. At the statewide level, condo and townhouse inventory at the end of 2025 was about 49% below the level it was at the end of 2008, a similar difference to that which we observed for single-family homes. Let's look now, very briefly, at the median time on market for closed sales in each property type category. Notice how this pattern reflects the shape of the inventory chart. That's not by coincidence. We already talked about how new listings add to inventory while sales and delistings subtract from inventory. But another way to look at how shifts in inventory levels are determined is to consider how long properties are sitting on the market. We had a record number of new listings of single-family homes in 2021, but inventory levels were in the gutter because these homes were typically selling in 10 to 15 days. Many of them were never counted in inventory at the end of the month because they didn't stay active long enough to make it there. Now, though, single-family homes that are selling are typically on the market for much longer. Half of December's closed sales were active for 54 days or more before they went under contract. That implies that most homes counted in December's end-of-month inventory were also counted in November, and many of them in October as well. So inventory expands when homes are moving more slowly. Overall, there's a fair amount of similarity between property types for what we saw for inventory levels in 2025, but condo and townhouse sales growth for the year was negative, while it was positive for single-family homes. And we just saw that condos and townhouses are typically taking longer to sell than single-family homes. It should be no surprise then that home price trends for condos and townhouses have been more negative than what we've seen for single-family homes. In every month of 2025, the median price for closed sales of condos and townhouses in Florida was visibly lower on a year-over-year basis, particularly in the middle of the year. That said, the spread did tighten up a little bit near the end of the year. In December, the median sale price only fell by 1.6% compared to a year ago, down to $310,000. That makes it the smallest decline observed in any month of 2025. Now, by contrast, the median price for single-family homes in Florida hugged its prior year values much more tightly in 2025. Only in the spring months was a gap really noticeable. In December, though, the median sale price was unchanged from a year ago at $415,000. Well, that's it for our 2025 year-end wrap-up. A comprehensive look at the stats over what turned out to be a surprising year about halfway through. Over the next couple of months, we'll discuss a little more about where the market might go from here in 2026. In the meantime, take a look at your local market data. We didn't drill down into local median prices in this video, but that's certainly something you can easily do if you're a member of Florida Realtors. Members can access our local reports at floridarealtors.org/research, as well as our interactive tool, SunStats. Take a look at your local market to see how prices have changed not only over the past year, but compared to the pre-pandemic market as well. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next month for the first data release of 2026.